somewhere along your path, there was a shift you can't explain. Maybe it came like thunder, some seismic, spiritual revelation. Or maybe it arrived in silence, the slow unraveling of who you thought you were. One day, what was once familiar suddenly felt foreign. You saw through the patterns, the masks, the noise, and underneath it all, you found silence. At first, that silence felt holy, like stepping out of a burning building into pure, untouched air. But then something strange happened. Meaning didn't explode, it dissolved. Not in tragedy, but like a quiet fading, as if your soul dimmed the lights on life and forgot to switch them back on. You stopped chasing, you stopped performing. Not from despair, but from something softer, a sacred kind of exhaustion, a stillness that felt both peaceful and unsettling. And that's when the whisper began, a quiet ache beneath the stillness. Why do I feel so empty now that I finally see clearly? This is the paradox no one prepares you for. We're told awakening will ignite purpose, fill us with radiant knowing. But for some, especially the sensitive, the inward, the seeker's awakening does something else. It empties the vessel. It burns away everything false, even desire itself, until you no longer recognize what you used to live for. And in that void, many mistake awareness for apathy, peace for disconnection, stillness for numbness. But maybe that hollow space isn't a failure. Maybe it's an invitation. Let's begin. The sacred pause. Why you feel lost after spiritual awakening. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I feel so empty? Even after waking up spiritually, you thought awakening would bring fire, purpose, a new path, but instead, you're here staring at the ceiling, not knowing what to do next. It's easy to blame circumstances, burnout, or even laziness. But what if I told you this disorientation is not failure, but the doorway to your truest self? Carl Jung called this the nigredo phase, the blackening. It's the first stage of alchemical transformation, where everything false must die. It's not depression, it's not indifference, it's the soul refusing to run on borrowed energy. The ambitions that used to motivate you, success, recognition, even love no longer spark movement, not because you're broken, but because your soul is done pretending. Think of it like this. The ego has always been your engine, loud, fast, fueled by external validation. But now that engine has stalled, and instead of fixing it, you're asked to do something terrifying. Sit in the silence, sit in the stillness, and wait for something real. Jung says, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the darkness. This is sacred ground. The Stoics would call this a rare kind of courage, not the kind that charges into war, but the kind that sits still while the world demands movement. Epictetus reminds us, you cannot control events, only your response. So here's your task. Respond to the void, not with panic, but presence. Instead of seeking purpose in doing, seek truth in being. Why does this matter in love and relationships? Because during this pause, the roles you used to play, lover, achiever, people pleaser, begin to dissolve. You're no longer chasing connections to feel worthy. You begin to crave something deeper, something honest. And when you're not pretending, you stop attracting those who love your masks. You begin to attract those who resonate with your essence. Maybe right now, you feel dull instead of inspired. Maybe you fear you've lost your drive. But what if you've simply outgrown the fuel that once moved you? This is not regression. It's your nervous system detoxing from the addiction to proving your worth. It's your soul reclaiming silence as a form of truth. If you resist this stage, if you run back to the ego's distractions, you'll delay the birth of something extraordinary. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But by facing this hollow silence with patience and honesty, you interrupt that fate, you become free. So yes, this is the pause, but it is not empty. It is full of meaning you've never touched. This stillness is not a void, but a womb. Something within you is gestating. The silence you fear is the birthplace of a voice that is entirely your own. It's time to awaken. You are not lazy, you are sacredly paused. Sit, listen, become. You do not live as you wish. You live as you believe you deserve. Marcus Aurelius. When the ego cracks, the collapse that sets you free, you thought clarity would come once you awakened. But instead, everything you once knew is falling apart. The career you built, the relationships you maintained, the roles you played, they no longer fit. And here's the question tearing through your mind. If I'm not who I used to be, and then who am I now? That haunting emptiness isn't weakness. It's the ego unraveling, the persona you built for survival, crafted from social approval, childhood patterns, and survival instincts, is dying. Carl Jung warned us that the path to the self begins with the dismantling of illusion. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he said, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the darkness, the space where everything you thought made you valuable begins to fade. The applause stops. The validation dries up. You're left with just you, and at first, you don't even recognize what that means. Imagine peeling off layers of armor you didn't know you wore. Armor forged from expectations. Be perfect, be useful, be admired. And when that armor clatters to the ground, there's no more script to follow, just silence, just space. This is where the self begins to speak, not in shouts, but in whispers. The Stoics would call this liberation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your thoughts no longer center around performing for others, the soul begins to find its true hue. But that shift isn't painless, it's a free fall from everything false. Many confuse this with being lost. But being lost only exists when you believe there's a map. Jung teaches us that the old map was never real, it was drawn by others. Now, you're being asked to walk without a map and instead trust your compass, your values, your truth, your inner resonance. In relationships, this ego death is profound. You may begin to see that some connections were not love, but survival attachments built on performance, caretaking, or unspoken contracts of mutual illusion. You start saying no more, often not to be rebellious, but to be real. You stop trying to be understood and start craving to be seen. What's the danger if we skip this stage? If we patch up the ego and go back to performing, we betray ourselves. Jung called this spiritual bypassing, when people seek the light but refuse to pass through their own shadow. And the price of avoiding this inner collapse is high. Anxiety, resentment, feeling like a stranger in your own life. But here's the breakthrough. When the ego dissolves, the authentic self begins to take form. And unlike the ego, it does not chase, it invites. It does not perform, it expresses. It does not control, it allows. It's time to awaken. Let what is false fall away. Let the silence shape you. As Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. And the moment you do, you'll realize you were never lost. You were just becoming real. The sacred void, where your soul begins again. Why don't I feel anything anymore? You're not depressed. You're not broken. You're standing at the edge of something sacred. That empty, numb, almost silent phase you're experiencing, it's not a failure of will. It's the death of false fuel. It's your soul refusing to run on old lies. We've been taught that constant movement is life. But Jung, in his depth psychology, told a different story. He called this phase the blackening, the nigredo of alchemical transformation, a time when the old self disintegrates, not because you did something wrong, but because something deeper is being born. Imagine the caterpillar inside the cocoon. It doesn't grow wings, it dissolves. Its form disappears. It becomes a formless soup before transformation. You're in that soup, and the world doesn't understand that. It tells you to stay productive, stay positive, push forward. But pushing in this phase only leads you further from your essence. You're not lazy, you're sacredly still. The Stoics remind us that real strength is in restraint. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." Right now, the wisest reaction is stillness, not avoidance, but surrender, a pause, a holy intermission between chapters of your life. And yes, it hurts, because the ego wants to rebuild. It wants a plan, a goal, a 5-year vision, but the soul only wants truth. And truth isn't found in achievement, it's found in alignment, in relationships. This void exposes everything built on illusion. You stop pretending. You withdraw from conversations that drain. You feel emotionally absent, not out of cruelty, but because you can no longer fake connection where truth is absent. It's not distance, it's purification. Here's the risk. If you mistake this sacred pause for failure, you'll try to fix it. You'll rush back into busyness, take jobs you've outgrown, cling to people you've outlived, and then you'll feel hollow again. That's the trap. But if you accept the void, if you breathe in the stillness, it will teach you. It will recalibrate your compass. It will introduce you to the part of yourself that doesn't need validation, doesn't crave applause, doesn't fear solitude, the part that just is. This is where rebirth begins, quietly. No fireworks, no grand declarations, just one silent moment of self-loyalty at a time. So what can you do? Sit with it. Let the silence wash over you like a dark ocean. Trust it. Say, this emptiness is not my enemy, it's my teacher. Protect it. Don't let noise invade the sacredness of your pause. It's time to awaken. Don't mistake the quiet for nothingness. As Jung said, in all chaos, there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order. You are being reordered, not for speed, but for soul. When motivation shifts from noise to resonance, why don't I care about the things I used to chase? Because your fuel has changed. Because you're no longer powered by the hunger of ego. You're starting to move from the silent pulse of authenticity. We often mistake motivation for adrenaline urgency, deadlines, ambition, external validation. But this kind of fuel is noisy. It screams, run harder or be left behind. That was the ego's fire, and when it dies, the silence feels like failure. But what if that silence is not absence, but the voice of your soul returning? Carl Jung taught that transformation begins when the ego dissolves, and the true self emerges not to impress, but to express. It doesn't perform. It reveals. You go from asking, "What will they think of me?" to "What truth would I betray by staying silent?" That's not laziness, that's evolution. In the alchemy of the soul, this is the beginning of the rubedo, the reddening, the phase after disintegration, when the self starts speaking through subtle desires, strange callings, quiet clarity. You're not lazy, you've just shifted into resonance. Jung called this the symbolic life, a path not driven by logic or performance, but by synchronicity, archetype, intuition. You act not from pressure, but from inner alignment. The world calls it irrational, but the soul calls it real. The Stoics, too, understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If something is in your control, attend to it. If not, let it go." In the new motivation, you only attend to what is yours to carry. You don't fake urgency anymore. You stop running to please. You walk when it's right. You pause when it's not. And in relationships, this is where it becomes radical. When motivation shifts from ego to essence, you stop performing love. You stop pleasing. You don't flirt to be chosen. You speak with honesty, not strategy. You say no without apology. You become unattractive to manipulation, but irresistible to truth. Here's what no one tells you. When the ego dies, you will feel blank. And then one day, something simple stirs, like the urge to paint, to teach, to walk away, to build again. It's not loud, but it feels clean, like a quiet yes in your bones. That's your new compass. Let go of the craving to explain this phase. Let go of the pressure to prove you're still driven. You are. But now your drive is divine. You're not here to outperform. You're here to embody. So what can you do? Wait for the quiet impulse. It may come without logic, but it will feel like home. Trust the slow clarity. Don't rush to fill the void. Let the new fire choose you. Say yes only when your body agrees. Let your soul reclaim your time. It's time to awaken. True power does not chase. It resonates. You no longer need to burn to be bright. living a symbolic life. When the soul begins to lead, do you feel like life no longer makes sense the way it used to? That's because you've outgrown the script. What once gave you direction, goals, rules, roles now feels hollow. But this emptiness isn't meaningless, it's symbolic. It's the soul asking to speak. You're not falling behind. You're being invited to live differently, not for results, not for applause, but in dialogue with meaning. Carl Jung called it the symbolic life, a way of living where intuition becomes your compass, dreams become guides, and life stops being a task list and starts becoming a conversation. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" you start wondering, "What is calling me?" It sounds strange in a world obsessed with schedules and plans, but living symbolically is not about abandoning life, it's about aligning with it. You no longer move by momentum, you move by resonance, by listening to your inner landscape before stepping into the outer one. This is not escape, this is courage, and it begins with awareness. When you wake up and realize the career you chased never fed your spirit. The people around you don't know your inner truth. The story you lived was built for survival, not fulfillment. This awareness is painful, but it's sacred. You're not broken, you're just hearing a new language, the language of the soul. The Stoics spoke of this in their own way. Epictetus said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." To live symbolically is to ask, what kind of soul do I want to become? And then act in alignment, even when no one claps. In love, this becomes revolutionary. You stop dating from desire alone. You stop chasing people who validate your mask. Instead, you look for resonance. You seek relationships that feel true, even if they look unconventional. You no longer need someone to complete you. You want someone who meets you where you've completed yourself. And when you live this way, you begin to move through life like it matters again, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. You create not to impress, but because you must. You speak not to be liked, but because the truth would hurt more if left unsaid. You choose friendships, work, love not for status, but for depth. This is the symbolic life. It's not loud, it doesn't boast, but it heals you. And it draws to you the people and experiences that recognize your truth. You're no longer chasing life, you're dialoguing with it. So what now? Slow down enough to hear your symbols. A dream, a gut feeling, a book that won't leave your mind. They are all trying to talk to you. Act from inner clarity, not outer pressure. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust it. Ask better questions. Not how do I succeed, but what wants to move through me? It's time to awaken. When you live symbolically, you stop betraying your soul. You begin to move with the rhythm of truth, and that changes everything. To be whole, you must face the shadow. Do you think healing is about becoming lighter, purer, better? It's not. It's about becoming whole. And that means stepping into the darkness you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Most people think their struggles come from the outside, a breakup, a failure, a betrayal. But Carl Jung taught that what truly wounds us is not what happens, it's what we refuse to see inside ourselves. Every time you overreact, avoid, or numb out, that's not weakness. That's the shadow, the parts of you you've pushed away, finally knocking. And if you keep ignoring it, it doesn't vanish, it governs you from the dark. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The anger you bury, the shame you carry, the craving to be loved at any cost. These are not flaws, they are exiled messengers, begging to be witnessed. The longer you deny them, the more power they have. And no amount of positivity can fix what you're still afraid to face. But when you turn toward the shadow, not to shame it, but to listen, you begin to reclaim energy you never knew you lost. The sadness becomes depth, the rage becomes clarity, the fear becomes freedom. This is the real work, not becoming perfect, becoming honest. From a Stoic view, this is the essence of courage. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, Power over your mind includes the willingness to sit with discomfort, to welcome the unhealed parts of you without running, to ask, what part of me is still unloved, still unheard, in love? This is transformational. When you don't face your shadow, you hide behind personas trying to impress, seduce, or please. But intimacy without self-acceptance is performance. It crumbles. Only when you accept your whole self, especially the parts you've rejected, can you offer something real to another person. So how do you begin? Write to your shadow. Ask, what do you want me to know? Let the answer come freely. Don't judge. Observe your triggers. Every strong reaction is a mirror. Ask, what is this really about inside me? Practice self-compassion. You are not weak for having wounds. You are brave for turning toward them. And know this, facing your shadow is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a lifelong relationship with your inner world. But every time you look inward instead of outward, you take back power, you stop reacting, you start responding. It's time to awaken. Wholeness is not found in light alone, it's forged in the fire of everything you've hidden. The more shadow you make conscious, the more free you become. The symbolic life, living from the soul, not the script. Word count, 698. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, yet something inside still feels dead? That emptiness isn't failure, it's a sign, a whisper from your deeper self that says, this isn't your path, this is your performance. Most people don't live, they perform. They play the role of the good partner, the successful achiever, the spiritual seeker. But something's missing, not because they aren't good enough, but because they're not aligned. They're not living a symbolic life. Carl Jung called it the great disease of modern times. People feel like they live meaningless lives, not because life is meaningless, but because they don't live symbolically. What is the symbolic life? It's when your choices aren't dictated by fear, habit, or expectation, but by resonance. It's when you don't ask, what should I do, but instead, what is my soul asking of me? The symbolic life is not a retreat from reality. It's a deeper participation in it. It doesn't avoid pain, but gives it meaning. It doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but finds guidance through it. You start noticing signs, synchronicities that aren't coincidence, but guidance. You stop chasing goals you've outgrown and start honoring what feels alive inside you. Your work becomes sacred. Your relationships become mirrors. Your silence becomes prayer. But to live this way, you must first stop betraying yourself. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you smile when you want to scream, every time you stay when you should go, that's self-betrayal, and your soul feels it. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." To be one means to live in accordance with your inner logos, your guiding reason, your truth. In relationships, this means dropping the act. Stop trying to be what others expect. Start showing up as who you are without makeup, without performance. Yes, it's risky, but love built on roles is fragile. Love built on truth is indestructible. So how do you step into a symbolic life? Ask better questions. Instead of, how do I succeed? Ask what feels sacred to me. Follow your resonance. If something gives you energy, it matters, even if no one else understands. Honor your silence. Spend 10 minutes a day with no agenda. Let your deeper voice speak. You don't need to abandon your life. You need to live it differently, more intentionally, more truthfully, more soulfully. This is not about changing your career or your lover. It's about changing your alignment. When your outer life reflects your inner world, meaning returns. Joy returns, power returns. This is the symbolic life. And it begins not with a grand decision, but a subtle shift. From should to must, from performing to expressing, from pretending to being. Now is the time to stop living someone else's idea of life. Let your soul lead. Let meaning be your compass. Before you go, help me reach those who have forgotten this simple truth. Real love will never ask you to shrink. True connection does not require the abandonment of your soul. And the most sacred relationship you will ever experience is the one you build with your own inner truth. If you felt something in this space, something subtle, something, still consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell. Here, we go beneath the surface. We listen for what isn't said. We explore the architecture of the unconscious, the hidden patterns beneath our relationships, and how each connection is a reflection of our own becoming. If there's a question, a theme, a wound you want explored, leave it below. This space breathes because of your presence. Your voice doesn't just matter here, it shapes this journey. Thank you for being here, not just watching, but showing up to your inner work, to the quiet labor of remembering who you truly are beneath the noise. And when the right person does arrive, your soul will not tremble, it will rest. But until that moment, let the deepest intimacy you know be the one within yourself. That is your home. That is your truth. And from that wholeness, everything real begins. Until next time, I'll meet you on the path.